Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us today for the latest in our Global Mapper webcast series. This one's going to be a short one. As you can see on the title slide, we're going to be introducing some of the academic programs that we have on offer. Now I'm joined today by a very special guest. Janet Lees is with me. We've actually managed to convince Janet to take a step away from her tech support duties. So if you're trying to call tech support right now, you're probably not getting an answer. But we'll let her back to answer those questions just a little bit. Janet is joining me today for a very special reason. Janet is a recent graduate of a local university, University of Maine, and was an active participant in our various academic programs. So, putting this together, we thought, well, who better to share her experience and expertise than Janet? Janet, great to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, nice to be here.
So we're going to hear from Janet. We're going to actually see an example of some of the workflows that she did with Global Mapper in just a little bit. Now, in terms of our academic programs, there are basically three components that we offer. The first, and this is something you may already be aware of, it's almost exactly a year ago that we rolled this out, if I'm not mistaken,
yeah,
Janet.
I think
so we're approaching, as we record this, the annual American Association of Geographers Conference, and in conjunction with that event last year, we introduced this free educational licensing program. And we announced it there, and we've had a tremendous response from schools and colleges all over the US and Canada for whom this program is available. Basically what this allows is free access to Global Mapper for in-classroom instruction and for lab use. And we're really finding that the feedback we're getting from faculty members is that it really helps them in the basic instruction of GIS. Given that Global Mapper is a relatively simple and relatively straightforward application, it allows them to focus on the practical application of GIS as opposed to spending too much time on overly complicated software instructions. Also, you'll notice on this slide that while the program currently is accessible for institutes of higher education within the US and Canada, we do also have discounts available if you're outside that area and you're a school or college and you're interested in pursuing the teaching of GIS with Global Mapper. We have a discounted licensing available outside of North America as well. Now, Janet, again, as a fresh graduate, you actually were involved in participation in this program at University of Maine.
Yeah, so this was my first exposure to Global Mapper, and it was nice because every computer in our academic lab had Global Mapper installed, so it didn't matter what computer you were sitting at, you had access to Global Mapper, and you could perform the workflows from the academic labs or even just kind of explore the program on your own.
Now, I know you weren't involved in the teaching, but I know from a faculty point of view, having access to software that does not have any effect on your budget is always an issue. I know the professor that you work with is a good friend of ours here at Blue Marble. We are constantly in communication to get feedback on the applicability of this. And as part of this program, we encouraged feedback. And Janet, I think you were part of that process as well. You actually shared some of your experience with Global Mapper as you were participating in this program.
Yeah, I did. So I was exposed to version 16 first, and if you've been a longtime user of Global Mapper, you probably remember the look and feel of that application. So I remember my comments a lot were it's a very easy to use application, however the look and feel was kind of what I would call retro.
Oh, be careful here, be careful. A lot of people out there used that version for many years.
Yeah. When working here at Blue Marble, I saw the introduction or the release of version 18, and I knew it was something that many students would appreciate because it would match the look and feel of a lot of other programs we have used.
So your position here is fairly unique. Not only were you a participant in our development process from an external point of view by providing that feedback, and we did get a lot of comments from students, especially that Global Mapper needed to be refreshed, but also you were able to take your experience and bring it to Blue Marble. You're now working from the inside and hopefully helping students that are still in college. So yeah, again, this is again just overview of our free academic use program. If you're not participating and you want to take a look, I put a website at the bottom of this slide. We'll also have some contact information at the end. We encourage you to sign up. Again, no risk, no cost for this. Now, another component of our academic programs is a brand new scholarship program we're going to be rolling out, and this is literally happening as we speak. We are going to be offering a $500 scholarship to a selected student who has used Global Mapper for some sort of research project or has written a paper based on themes that they've explored or used Global Mapper for. Details of this are still being developed as we speak, but we want to make sure that, in getting this information out, that this is on everyone's radar. The plan here is to start the next school year, so starting probably towards the end of the summer 2018, we will make a formal announcement. You can be a participant in our academic lab program or academic licensing program, or you can be an independent student. Your submission will be accepted, will be reviewed, and ultimately, if you're successful, you will be given a $500 scholarship. And Janet, unfortunately, with all due apologies, this is not open to you. I know you would have liked this during your time at the University of Maine, but certainly you can contact your former schoolmates and make them aware of the availability of this program. So again, look for some more information about this. Again, we're going to have some basic information on the website as noted at the bottom of the screen. Details coming towards the end of the summer. Now, the final part of our academic program is the academic curriculum. In conjunction with the licensing that we offered to provide access to the software in an educational setting, we developed a series of instructional materials, basically labs, that faculty can deploy to their students. It goes through some of the basic principles of GIS, some specific workflows. The materials include printed instructions. It includes the associated data. So it's basically a package that you can download, and you can have your students walk through each of these workflows with a defined end result. You follow the instructions, you get to kind of the culmination. And it provides a really nice way to not only introduce Global Mapper if that's the application of choice for using in your lab, but also we try to make sure we're introducing some of the more broad principles of GIS. And once again, I'm going to turn to Janet here, because Janet, you were a participant in the academic curriculum program.
I was. So, and these labs really helped teach us GIS concepts while not having to fight with the application.
Fight with the application. Yeah. Wow. Okay. I want to say as well, and this is just now that you'll see we have updated these. These are the new and enhanced versions are available, reflecting some of the current enhancements that have been applied to Global Mapper. Janet took the initiative to do this. Having participated from the students' point of view, she's now actually helping us to update and adapt these materials to reflect some of the new functionality in Global Mapper. So it's great to have somebody who has been on both sides as part of this process. So the current curriculum materials include what you see on the screen now. We have 8 labs. 2 of them have been added, are currently being finalized, will be available for download. The first lab is probably the most important for students who are new to GIS. In that lab, we go through, as it says, the basic principles of GIS, going through some very specific workflows to introduce the concepts of data creation. Janet, I'm looking for Janet for assistance here, because again, she was a participant. We use the drawing functionality.
Yeah, introduce us to the digitizer, the basic components of Global Mapper, but also importing data, the basics of spatial analysis. So it covers a lot of broad, important GIS concepts.
And what data sets are available, what file formats are available. So that is a good one to start with, obviously. The remaining labs go into very more specific functions. A very common one is Lab 2. The commonly used one is the terrain generation and contours. This is a common workflow for many people using Global Mapper, but certainly for instructional purposes, working with LiDAR data and being able to generate surface models, terrain, and contours. Janet, did you do this one when you were in school?
I did, yep. I did all of these labs. Lab 4 definitely stands out to me as well, which goes over rectifying. I remember that being a very useful workflow, taking an unrectified image and using actually our online data tool to bring that unrectified image into Global Mapper.
Excellent. Now, did you find when you were going through the instructions, were they clear? Did you get confused? Were there any issues with how clear the workflows were?
They were clear, and it also helped that there was a screenshot along with most of the steps. So if I was unclear or had some questions, I could go to the screenshot and see what window I needed to use. But with updating, I also took into consideration a lot of student comments of they wanted more explanations regarding some steps. So why are they doing this step, or what is it doing?
Right.
So I definitely took that into account as well when updating these labs.
So you've enhanced it to actually provide more context, which is great. I mean, when these were originally written, I think our main motivation was to make sure the step-by-step instructions were clear, but your enhancements have added context, which is very useful. I think the best thing to do now, again, we want to keep this fairly short, but it's probably a good idea maybe to take a look. And Janet has selected the first lab as an example. We're not going to do the whole thing. How long would you say for the entire lab if a student was following this? Maybe lab 1, maybe 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours, perhaps.
Yeah, it depends on your familiarity with GIS applications. But as a new user, I'd say it would be a good few hours. And it definitely. You want to take your time with it. You want to really learn the concepts that are introduced. Right.
So, obviously we don't want to spend the time to do the entire lab today, but I think we'll take a small section of Lab 1 and we'll just show you how that works and how that can be used for your students. So here we have the PDF of Lab 1 cover, as you can see. I'm just scrolling down very quickly here to take a look at what a typical lab the instructional material looks like. So we have an introduction here, a little bit of a synopsis as to the theme that's going to be covered. We've got some requirements here. Obviously, you need Global Mapper. That's a requirement. We've also, to make the process of managing data more convenient, a folder in your desktop called My Maps. Any data you export, any data you process is going to be saved in there. So some very basic instructions as to how you proceed with the lab. A synopsis, an overview of the workflow, the data, where that particular data is located, and I happen to have the folder open off screen. I'll drag it in temporarily here. So this is the data, the folders that pertain to all of the sections in Lab 1. And then we've got outline, kind of high level, dividing it into sections. And obviously with most GIS processes, we begin with importing and various other procedures as well. And then we get into the actual instructions, the actual meat of the lab, and you can follow these along using the data, and hopefully, as you're doing that, learn some principles of GIS as well as the functionality of Global Mapper. So at this stage, I'm going to hand over to Janet, and Janet is going to guide us through one of the very specific elements of this workflow. I'm going to scroll down here so we can find the appropriate section, and
I chose this workflow to show because this is one of them that also stands out to me when I was a student, is I remember how easy it was to visualize the spatial data. And we actually used it for one of our final GIS projects that we did in our Intro to GIS class. We used this heat map to show that spatial relation. So in this example that we're going to go over, this is a part of one of the longer workflows within the academic lab, and this is creating the density grid. And so you can see here we're going to create the density map to visualize the clustering of communication towers in the state. So this is going to involve having the previous loaded files in Global Mapper. And then you can see with these screenshots we're going to apply some settings in the density setup window. And then this is our overall result. So this is what we're looking to produce.
So this gives us an idea that when you're going through the labs, you'll see in the instructions what the final product will look like.
Yeah.
Know you've made a mistake in any of the settings.
Yeah. And so we have Global Mapper opened here. And so we're just going to load those two files that was listed in the academic labs. And so we have our towers here, and we have our towns. And so you can tell from the previous screenshot that you saw of our final result, this doesn't look anything like it. It's black and white, doesn't tell us too much about the density or the distribution of towers in the state of Maine. And so from the instructions, we're going to go to create a density grid and then apply the settings that you also saw in those manuals. The area units are square kilometers. And we're going to select OK. And now we get that result that we saw in that previous screenshot. So we can see that there's a lot of cell towers in the Portland area, in the Bangor region, and then a few up by Caribou and Fort Kent.
So those of us who live in the state of Maine can take a look and see why are we losing our cell phone service. And it's quite clear here that heavy concentration in the southern part of the state. So you've already told me something. You already taught me something today, Janet. This is great.
Yeah, and so this was one of the things that, as I mentioned before, really stood out to me, is that with a few simple clicks and windows, you can create a density grid that clearly shows where the highest concentration of towers or points are within your data set.
So this is just one example of one of the workflows that would be available in the curriculum. I know, again, very simple instructions, predefined output, and a great way to allow your students to essentially allow them to tell a story from the data by creating something that's visually appealing, such as this.
And as we see in the academic labs, this is what we saw in Global Mapper, so it kind of gives you a sense of what you should expect. And at the end of each lab, we'll scroll down here a little bit, you can see that there's still more workflows, more screenshots. There's a final exercise. And what this does is it gives students a chance to create their own map using data that we provided without step-by-step workflows. And so it usually uses many of the concepts that were introduced in that lab. So in this case, Lab 1, so such as spatial analysis using that same heat map that we just created, and some of the other different concepts that we went over. And we have introduced a professor key, and so what there is now is professors can have an example of what should be produced during this final exercise. And of course it can be varying depending on what students do with it, but it kind of gives professors an idea of what should be produced.
So the professors can cheat, they don't have to do the actual work, they get the finished product. So that's great. I mean, this again, very quick example of one of the workflows, or one section of one of the workflows that are available in the labs. As we saw on the slide, there are currently 8 labs. Probably more to come, we can say. I mean, there's a lot of other topics that we would like to include in there. But these are, again, freely available if you're a representative of an institute of higher education, faculty member, teacher. These are free for you. Please feel free to download the files themselves and certainly integrate them. The other thing I should mention here in regards to this final exercise, there is also the opportunity to adapt as needed. Maybe bringing in some local data might be more applicable. Obviously, we're very biased here. We're from the state of Maine, so the data we delivered very often focuses on our geographic proximity. But again, the principles you introduce in these labs, if you want to apply them in a more local context, certainly by all means bring in some more data. Now, I also want to put this in the context of one of the sections of our academic program, and that's the scholarship. If your students getting to this stage in participating in the labs want to use the concepts themselves for their own research project, this is again a point at which you can let them loose, get them to do some field data collection, a little bit of analysis if necessary, maybe some presentation. Submit the results of that to us. Again, submission details will be available later in the year, and they will be in line for the award of that scholarship, which will be sometime during the 2018-2019 school year. So just by way of wrapping this up, contact information, more information. That URL is an important one. bluemarblegeo.com/academic provides information on all of the components of this program. The scholarship information will be available there. There's a little bit of information right now. The application to request the free academic licenses are there, and the request for the academic lab materials is also on that site. So bluemarblegeo.com/academic. If you have questions about the licensing, availability of Global Mapper, orders at bluemarblegeo.com. If you're, for instance, if you're an academic institution outside of North America, you want to find out what discounts available, your best bet is to email the folks in our sales team, orders at bluemarblegeo.com. I didn't put the email address for our tech crew up here, but we usually, in our other webinars, we usually include that, geohelp at bluemarblegeo.com. If you have technical questions about the application, or maybe some comments about the workflows, maybe you want to change them or adapt them, that would be your best bet as well. And the old school phone method is also available. This is our local telephone number outside of the US, +1 area code 207-622-4622 is our line if you want to put a verbal request in for any of our academic materials. So Janet, thank you. I really appreciate your sharing your experience and expertise with the labs today.
Yeah, thank you. It was definitely a fun time updating them, especially from a student standpoint to now a employee.
Excellent, and you better go back to work. There's lots of customer requests waiting for you. Thank you very much for joining us for this brief webcast, folks, and we will talk to you next time.